The following tale is plucked from the pages of a nameless tome, a manuscript whispered of in hushed tones by those who dare tread too close to the edge of sanity. It is said that merely speaking of the events you are about to hear invites danger beyond reckoning. For these are the deeds and misdeeds of souls whose fates were sealed the moment they crossed into shadowed realms where darkness reigns eternal. Be warned, listener, do not repeat what you hear to others. Do not commit these words to memory, nor linger on the images conjured within your mind. To do so is to risk incurring the wrath of, well, perhaps it is best if I leave the name unspoken. Even now, it claws at the corners of my mind. Know this, should you choose to continue, you do so at your own peril. And remember, you have been warned. This is a tale called, Deal of the Damned. The saloon doors swung open with a creak, allowing the sweltering, dusty wind to rush inside like an uninvited guest. The muted sounds of idle chatter, the clink of glasses, and the occasional tinkle of piano keys filled the dimly lit room. Faces turned briefly, eyes squinting through the hazy air to glimpse the newcomer, but most quickly turned back to their drinks or games of chance, uninterested in yet another drifter passing through town. Except this drifter wasn't just passing through. Clad in a worn duster coat, a broad-brimmed hat pulled low over his eyes, the man known only as Seth Miller made his way through the throng of patrons. His boots thudded heavily against the creaking wooden floorboards, each step measured and purposeful. He was a stranger to these parts, lean and hard as the desolate plains outside, but he carried an aura of authority that made more than a few men shift uneasily in their seats. Seth's destination was clear, the round table in the far corner, half hidden in shadows. There, a high-stakes card game was underway. The players, a collection of hardened ranchers, slick city folk, and a few desperate men with more hope than sense, sat hunched over their hands, eyes flicking nervously to the center of the table, where a considerable pile of money rested. It wasn't just money up for grabs tonight. The real stakes were whispered of in town all week: property deeds, family heirlooms, even a few pocket watches that had likely belonged to dead men. But rumors spoke of something else, something much more dangerous, riding on this game. Seth's gaze flickered briefly to the left as he approached the table. There, against the far wall, sat a figure shrouded in a hooded black robe, motionless and silent. No one else seemed to notice the figure, or perhaps, no one dared acknowledge its presence. For Seth, however, the air around the figure crackled with a dark energy, and he knew exactly what it was. A soul collector. One of death's own emissaries, summoned only when a soul's time was nearly up. A faint smile ghosted across Seth's lips. Tonight was going to be interesting. He slid into the last open seat at the table without a word, his eyes scanning the other players. There were 6 in total, each more tense and wary than the last. A few nodded curtly at him in acknowledgement, but most simply eyed the pile of wealth greedily, fingers twitching with the urge to win it all. The dealer, a grizzled man with a face like sun-baked leather, glanced at Seth, then at the rest of the players. "You got the money to buy in, stranger?" Seth reached into his coat and tossed a thick roll of bills onto the table, the cash landing with a satisfying thud. "That should cover it." The dealer nodded slowly, his gaze lingering on Seth a moment longer than necessary. There was something unsettling about this newcomer, something that made the hairs on the back of the dealer's neck stand up. But this was the biggest game he'd ever dealt, and he wasn't about to let some bad feeling get in the way. "Welcome to the game," the dealer said gruffly, shuffling the deck with practiced hands. "Ante up, gentlemen." As the cards were dealt and the game began in earnest, Seth leaned back in his chair, his expression calm and unreadable. He wasn't here for the money or the land deeds. He was here for something far more valuable, a soul. The game wore on, tension tightening like a noose around the table. As cards were flipped and bets placed, fortunes shifted and tempers flared. One by one, players were eliminated, forced to leave the table empty-handed, their dreams of wealth shattered. Soon, only 3 remained. There was the rancher, a burly man with a thick mustache and sweat-stained shirt, who kept glancing at the exit as if reconsidering his choice to stay. Across from him sat a slender, well-dressed gentleman, a banker, judging by the fine cut of his suit and the gold chain of his pocket watch. The man's eyes were cold and calculating, his movements precise and deliberate as he slid another stack of bills into the pot. And then there was Seth, the unflinching, enigmatic drifter who seemed utterly unfazed by the mounting stakes. "Call," Seth said softly, his voice cutting through the hushed silence like a blade. The rancher's eyes darted to Seth, his hand trembling as he pushed a few crumpled bills forward. "Damn it. I call too." The banker smirked, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. "Bold move, gentlemen. But it'll cost you." He reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a small, ornate key, one that seemed far too valuable to be mere collateral. The dealer's eyes widened as he realized what it was. "That's the key to the Goldridge mine, ain't it?" The banker's smirk widened. "Indeed. Worth more than this entire town put together." "So," he glanced between Seth and the rancher. "What do you have that's worth matching?" The rancher's face flushed red. I ain't got nothin' that can match that." The banker's smirk turned into a sneer. "Then fold, and get out of my sight." But the rancher didn't move. His gaze shifted to Seth, a desperate gleam in his eyes. "Please, stranger, you got something, don't ya? We can team up, take him down together." Seth remained silent for a long moment, his gaze flicking briefly to the soul collector, who hadn't moved an inch since the game began. Slowly, Seth reached inside his coat and drew out a small, silver locket. It was simple and unadorned, but something about it drew the eye, as if it held a hidden power. The banker's eyes narrowed. "What's that?" Seth placed the locket gently on the table, his gaze locking onto the banker's. "This is worth more than your mine. More than anything you've ever owned." The banker snorted derisively. "A trinket? Don't insult me, stranger." Seth's lips twitched into a faint smile. This locket belonged to a woman named Clara. She made a deal with a man who offered her freedom from her debts, in exchange for a piece of her soul. This is all that remains of her now. A ripple of unease passed through the room, and the rancher took an involuntary step back, his eyes wide. That's witchcraft, that is." Seth's gaze didn't waver. "It's far more than that. This locket binds the soul of whoever touches it. If you're brave enough to take the risk." The banker's smirk faltered, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. But his greed outweighed his caution. He leaned forward, his fingers brushing the locket's smooth surface. "I'll take that bet." The soul collector shifted ever so slightly, the shadows around it deepening. The cards were dealt one last time. The dealer's hands trembled as he laid out the river card, his gaze darting nervously between the players. The rancher glanced at his hand and cursed softly, throwing his cards down in defeat. "I fold." It was down to Seth and the banker. The banker's gaze was locked onto Seth, his eyes glittering with anticipation. "Let's see what you've got, stranger." Seth turned over his cards, revealing a straight flush. The banker's face paled, his mouth working soundlessly as he stared at the winning hand. No, this isn't possible. You cheated." Seth leaned back, his gaze calm and steady. "The cards don't lie." The banker's hands clenched into fists, rage and fear warring in his eyes. He turned to the dealer, then to the silent onlookers, but no one moved to help him. Slowly, his gaze shifted to the soul collector, who had finally risen from its seat. What is that thing?" the banker whispered, his voice trembling. The soul collector stepped forward, its hooded face shrouded in darkness. "Your time has come, Jonathan Hargrave. The debt must be paid." The banker stumbled back, his eyes wide with terror. No. I made no deal. I have no debt. The collector's voice was a low, bone-chilling whisper. You took what was not yours, and now you must give what you cannot afford to lose. With a cry of desperation, the banker turned and ran, shoving aside chairs and tables in his frantic bid for escape. But the collector merely raised a hand, and the banker froze in place, his limbs locking as if caught in an invisible grip. Please, the banker begged, tears streaming down his face. I'll give you everything. The mine, the money, just let me go. The soul collector's hood tilted, as if considering the plea. Your wealth means nothing. The only currency I seek is your soul. A blinding flash of light erupted from the collector's hand, and the banker screamed, a sound of unearthly agony that echoed through the saloon, reverberating in the hearts of every man present. The light intensified, wrapping around the banker like a cocoon of fire, and then he was gone. Nothing remained but the lingering scent of ash and the faint hum of power dissipating in the air. The saloon was deathly silent. No one dared move or speak. The soul collector turned its hooded gaze to Seth. Our business is concluded, for now. Seth inclined his head. Until next time. With a swirl of its black robes, the collector vanished, leaving behind only a faint chill in the air. Seth stood slowly, tucking the silver locket back into his coat. He glanced at the empty table, at the pile of money and deeds that meant nothing to him. He had come here for one purpose, and that purpose was fulfilled. But there were more debts to be collected, more souls teetering on the edge. With a nod to the dealer, who stared at him with a mixture of awe and fear, Seth turned and walked out of the saloon, disappearing into the night. The wind whispered through the empty streets, carrying with it a voice that was neither human nor animal. Be warned, stranger. There are deals that should never be made, games that should never be played. For death always gets his due, one way or another. The voice faded into silence, leaving only the faintest echo of its chilling promise lingering in the air. Thank you for taking the time to listen to this tale. I hope you enjoyed the story and felt immersed in this world of fantasy and adventure. If you'd like to hear more epic stories like this, make sure to subscribe to this channel so you never miss the next chapter in our journey. See you in the next adventure.